Hi, beautiful souls. Welcome to Conscious Revolution Podcast. I'm your host, Shivani, and this is the place where we talk about wellness, mindset, spirituality, manifestation, mysticism, and all beautiful things around mind, body, spirit coherence. So, today I'm very excited to introduce you to Emmie Rae, who is the founder of the Daily Rest Studio. She is a restorative teacher. She is really actually more than a restorative teacher because through her incredible work, she's really teaching us that it is possible for us to live in gently in this fast-paced modern world. And I've been a part of her daily rest studio, and it's been such an incredible reset for my nervous system to experience her work. So I'm really excited for you to learn more about rest, slowing down, and experiencing life through Emmy's lens of slow, gentle living. Uh, and I really hope you enjoy this and take notes and bring in rest and make it a practice in your everyday life. Emmy, welcome to Conscious Revolution Podcast. I am so happy and delighted to have you on board. Um, it's just like your timing on the podcast in my life. It's just so perfect. Uh, and I think especially that we are having this conversation in this month of September, where uh, I feel like grace is such a big theme. I'm sure inside your portal, but also in my life, I just want to say, like, before joining the Daily Rest Studio this month, I swear my theme of the month was grace. And the moment I saw it, you sharing on your story, I was like, this is it. This is my sign.
It's so interesting. I love that so much because almost every month already, this is a crazy little mini story just to begin with. I have the theme for next month in my mind. And then a woman who's in the studio, she texts me on the Pisces full moon and she was like, Emmy, I have to pass on this message, even though I'm a bit scared to, but I have to say, I think we should explore a practice like this in the studio. And she said the exact word that's going to be the theme. And
Mm.
honestly, I feel like the studio is so co-created, like it's so, anyway, I just think I love that. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing.
Yeah, and I just want to say that happened for the second time. Like even like last month, I was like seen. It's like I was talking about seen all the time in August, and I think it's also the Leo energy, but I was all about seen, the need to be seen, the desire to be seen. And so this time when it happened for the second time, I was like, I gotta listen.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I love that so much. How the universe is always guiding us to the next path, to the next place. And talking of which, I think uh, your work, your lifestyle, your way, the way you communicate, it has resonated so deeply with me and definitely been an um, expansive example to kind of like see the possibility of not really having to give up your purpose, your soul calling, or neither yourself, which is why I started this podcast with that word grace. It's about when you offer grace to others, it's also about offering that grace to ourselves. It doesn't have to be this or that. How did your journey start uh, with that, like honoring, offering that grace to yourself, but also to what you feel like contributing or sharing in your community, with the world, in whichever way it has come for you?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. I love what you and I were speaking about briefly before we started recording. Often there's this pull when maybe you just become interested in slow living or living gently or meditation or spirituality, whatever it is. And there's definitely that pull or that call to be like, should I be living on a deserted island or deep in the mountains? And I do think about that, I do have those moments where I'm like, Japanese countryside, by the ocean, like that's appealing. But I love this idea of like, we can still have, whether you're self-employed or you have a job that asks a lot of you, or a family that asks a lot of you, or you have a big social community or whatever it is. I love this idea of like, we can still create the dream business, or have the big family, or have the big social life, and also live softly, live gently, have that time and space for rest. And that's what I was thinking about with this theme of grace, which is like, grace is not necessarily just like always being poised and always being like, like a ballerina or something. Like grace, I think, really is the ability to yeah, to very much like hold ourselves gently no matter what wave we're in. So it's kind of like, I think that's a big theme in everything I'm thinking about at the moment, is that middle space, that like, which we spoke about just a moment ago, of that kind of space in between. Yeah.
Yeah. That sweet spot, I
Mm,
think currently a lot of us are craving for. I also feel, specifically with the paradigm shifting, with our needs, our desires, our tribal needs shifting. And as we talk about grace, like, so I have been really into human design, really exploring gene keys for the past 1.5, 2 years. And specifically this week, of course, I have my Mercury gate in 22, which is about grace and openness. So that's been like really opening up for me this month. And absolutely, whatever I have dived into, grace is not about being poised, grace is not about being perfect. And as you said, like a ballerina, but it's more about being messy, actually being in the thick of that glorious emotional mess. Like, I read one of the blogs, and I just want to like kind of like just put in this, because I feel it was so beautiful. This woman, she explained how she experienced grace in her life. uh, she went to this retreat, and she was like, and after we had this all intense breath work and yoga and stuff like that, after 2 hours or 5 hours, they were lying on the ground, thick in sweat, greasy, and they're, like, tears rolling down their cheeks. And she was like, that was grace. That
yeah.
space of non-judgment. Nobody was judging you, because everybody was going through that extremely vulnerable space. And I just love how you brought that up. And because this really, I think, kind of like reminds us that uh how I think society kind of like always, even with these sometimes the words that we like to associate with, brings us back to that old paradigm ways of fitting in, trying to be perfect, trying to be poised, trying to have your shit together. uh
Hmm.
but that's not how it's meant to be always.
Yeah, I love that image of just being like thick with sweat, like, and seeing the beauty in that. I think that's it. I think it's like, and we spoke about this in the studio, right? Like being able to see the beauty.
Yeah.
That's grace, no matter what. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So, how did grace come into your life, into shifting? Like, were you always like this, like living this slow lifestyle, reading books, having teas, talking about Japanese culture, enjoying rest? Uh, was it always like that? I'm pretty sure not, but I would love to hear it from you. How did that happen? How did that tipping point come, and how did you land here?
Yeah, it's just like that thing. Whatever we need the most is what we are here to teach to the world, right? But I don't know, for me, like when I was a child, when I was young, I grew up in a small town by the ocean, and I loved reading. I just like, I would spend so much time reading. I also loved ballet, and was kind of this, very, as a child, I was also very excitable, a lot of energy, but also at the same time quiet, very would easily kind of lose myself in a book for the whole entire day. And so I think that's an interesting juxtaposition that probably many of us relate to, in that idea of being like introverted, extroverted, or be, we all have, a lot of us, I think we have one foot in each side, which I think is why this idea of like, I of like, should I be a hermit in the mountains if I'm into meditation? But like part of you being like, but I don't want that, because I also love the feeling of the city or people around me, whatever it is. So yeah, as I grew up, I obviously forgot about uh, you know, the person I was as a small human, as a young child. And when I was in my kind of early 20s, I started teaching yoga and practicing yoga, because I was spending a lot of time in kind of the creative world, doing a lot of writing. I was writing a lot of poetry. I was running poetry events. I was like very, very heavily involved in this, yeah, creative community, which wasn't the healthiest place, to be in terms of like lifestyle. And so I kind of went into the yoga practice, and quite quickly found myself totally obsessed with it, and then also teaching it. It just kind of, one thing led to another. And so on one level, I experienced what, the meditation practice and eventually the rest practice gave back to me, in terms of like giving me more space to just like feel my way through the world, but also more space to actually be more creative, and like do better writing and create better work. Um, but in the pursuit of being a yoga teacher, I also, as many people who've done this know, was teaching 6 million classes a week all over the city. Like loving what I was doing, but not having any time for myself or to do what I love to do. And being a sacral being in human design, which I know you are too. I think there's this really big misconception that if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And to an extent, I can get behind, like, this is technically, I'm working right now. Technically, you're working right now, right? So like, amazing, love it. But like, as much as we love what we do, if we don't have time to read books, or, go for long, slow walks in the trees, or have our tea, or whatever it is, then we're not going to feel good, and we're not going to be kind of at our best. And so, yeah, it was really this interesting, very experiential learning of like, doesn't matter how much you love teaching yoga, you're doing too much of it and it's really unhealthy. And it's, so it's like, through my becoming a yoga teacher, I kind of got roped into teaching rest and restorative yoga because of that part of my personality that is very gentle and is very quiet. It wasn't my first choice, but through that, I really fell in love with it. And then, kind of as the years went on, and as human design came into play, I realized that I could actually kind of, and maybe this sounds like dirty, I could be way more productive and get way more done in my business life when I took more intentional time to rest and move slowly. So and still to this day, there's so much noise externally about what your life should look like if you have a successful business. And there's just this, it's a constant practice of coming back and being like, I know what's true for me, and I know
Yeah.
that that's not my way. So yeah, like I'm trying to make it a little bit concise, but that's kind of my experience going forward, of actually realizing, having this almost slap in the face of like, when I really like, yeah, take time to watch my Japanese like vlogs, or like lie on the floor for 20 minutes and listen to music, I can do better work. I
Yeah.
can, and so that, yeah, it's like we were saying before, there tends to be this pull towards slow living, or this pull toward hustle culture, let's say. But I'm like, I'm feeling that they actually meet so well in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember, so my last season has been all about I think my each season reflects where I am in my life, and this is the first episode of the third season. So I think my last season was really about somewhere me saying this over and over again, that as I'm diving deep into human design, uh, and I'm getting a lot of examples like you. Um, I'm realizing that there is a midway. Is a middle ground. I don't. There doesn't have to be this or that. I don't have
Yeah.
to actually be on your purpose, make money, do what you love to do, kind of like a very bro motivational lifestyle,
Yeah.
but also not like abandon everything and go into the woods and live in an island, because I also have a deep desire to connect with my community, to share with my community,
Yes.
to share my gifts. And yeah, I think collectively for every, I think, generators out there, every be it manifesting generators or generators, I think this has been a theme uh to kind of like replenish our sacrals also, because the sacral will only give you more energy to do when you really honor and respect it as well, and fill its cup as well. uh
Yeah.
because actually the same story, honestly, where I felt like, oh, throughout my early 20s, I was like, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? And then even though I was doing what I've always done, what I love to do, and the purpose has evolved over the time. It started with writing, but eventually it all went down to that same space. Like, even though I'm loving what I love to do, I was so exhausted. And then it felt like, but the whole point of me doing what I love to do was to be happy. And I don't think
Yeah.
I'm happy.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I think I think a lot of us would resonate with that energy of kind of like finding that sweet spot. How did kind of rest help you like bring you more into that energy of receiving from
Mm.
yourself, so that you could give to others in that way? How did rest, like as you started teaching to other people, like how did that kind of like start making changes in your life? Like how did you started to know like this is so important? Like nobody's talking about rest, to be honest. You're the first person I have seen so loudly speaking about rest, honestly. Like I remember binge here listening to all your podcasts, like literally typing Emmie Rae, because I wanted to hear more about rest. And yeah, most of your podcasts are about rest, most of your interviews. So
Yeah.
yeah, like I would say I've started talking about it after hearing it from you. Where did you get it from, and how did that play out in your life?
Yeah, yeah, it's so interesting, right? Like what happened for me was actually I did a yoga teacher training, and as I started to teach yoga, people very literally like, would kind of come to my class. Someone would come to my class and say, "Do you teach restorative yoga?" Or, "We need a yin yoga teacher. Do you want to teach at my studio?" And so the thing about me is that I am a nerd, like a big nerd, and B, I can be very determined. And so and I'm also like, I can also fall into the trap of being like a good girl, wanting to be the good, like the teacher's pet, right? And so the determined part of me was like, I need to take these class opportunities to kind of grow as a teacher and to get my foot in the door. But the nerd and the good girl part of me was like, I need to understand these practices way better before I start teaching them. So another teacher was kind of mentoring me. And then I'm a 5'1" in human design as well. So
I was about to ask, are you a one?
I'm the one. And so I was researching everything, obviously got the books, and, through conversations and research, I found, basically I became aware of the woman who really made restorative yoga, so very traditional restorative yoga, what it is today. And again, she has a cult following. She practiced with BKS Iyengar, who I know there's lots of controversy about him now, unfortunately, for so many of the kind of yoga teachers of the past. But anyway, she studied with him for many, many, many years. And what she had kind of realized and what I'd learned from him he was always saying, like, people want to show off their handstands and their forearm stands, but no one wants to show off their shavasana, and that's the hardest posture of all. And even in BKS setting, there's like light on yoga. He talks about how, you know, in that era, which was in like the 60s, I believe, maybe, yeah, the 60s that book came out. Um, it was like to counteract the intensity or the nervous system overstimulation of modern life, 20 minutes of shavasana a day. That's like this. How many years ago is that? That's like decades ago. And it's so different to where we are now. We're walking around with like the world in our pocket. We're all totally addicted to technology and devices and all that stuff. And so, anyway, she kind of took his teachings and soften them around the edges a little bit, because that
Mm.
version of restorative was kind of like lying on the floor with like lots of weight plates on your bones. Look at extreme rest. She softened around the edges. I went and studied with her in Texas, in Montana, which is, on the other side of the earth to Sydney, Australia. And I learned from her daughter as well, and kind of just went all the way in and like, let me understand. I studied with another guy, Roger Cole. So and not only did I learn all of that, I think the most important part was that I decided to do 20 minutes of rest a day. So that's when I was like, if I'm going to
Mm.
teach this, I need to not only learn about it and know about it, because that's just, but I also need to really, give it a go. And yeah, you know what? Like some days it's still hard. This was like 2015 that I started doing this, and everyone thought I was, insane, and they just laughed, kind of like went, oh yeah, whatever, that's not real yoga and all this kind of stuff. And even for me back then, it was, I had a meditation practice, but to lie down and just be soft. Um, Oh my, like it's not easy. It's not easy, and so much would come up. But I would, again, the determined part of me stuck to it, and I started to see so much shift and change that I became very excited to teach it, because I was like, no one is teaching this, and the only people who are teaching it are catering it toward injuries or people who are older
Mm.
or people
Yeah.
who just, and I was like, creatives, entrepreneurs, like young people, people who are like, moms, that's who needs this stuff, because it gives you like just so much more energy and so much ability, again, to hold more and receive more, because you're just, I think for so many of us, we're so deeply in kind of the masculine, right? Of like, even all of us generators, MGs, we're like, I can make it happen. I can go and get it. Like, that's not the problem. The problem is like, how can we hold more? How can we like actually receive more? Even just, so many things. Like, it's like, yes, the nervous system benefits, but it's also like learning to be supported,
Yeah.
like learning to be with yourself, and sometimes even just learning to be bored, which is so rare, because now like we don't get bored. We just pick up our phone and like the moment's gone. But even sometimes if you're lying down for 10 minutes and you're bored, that's where magic comes from. That's where ideas come from. That's where insight comes from. So yeah, that's kind of, you know that's how I found myself in that practice. And it just, that 20 minutes most days, it's my favorite phrase, most days, not every day, really. That was what, I guess, after doing that for now, I don't know, 7 years or how long it's been, it just kind of, it rearranges your whole life into knowing that, like, because when you take 20 minutes out a day to kind of do nothing, or 10 minutes, whatever you have, you realize that that timeout gives you more time. So I think what that sets is this foundation of like, the hustle mentality comes from like, I haven't got enough time. I haven't got enough time. And I used to feel like that. I always felt like that. Oh, I don't have enough time in my day. And now it's like, we have time. There is time.
Yeah.
And the slower I go, the more time I have, but it's like very tricky for the mind.
Absolutely. And I think me really like having that like I really have this very busy energy. And I remember reading about the sleeping phoenix because my incarnation crosses there. And
Mm,
and it said something like, it's very hard to wake these people up because they're so busy. It's such a busy energy. And I swear, I have never said in my entire life I'm bored, because I'm never, no matter how alone I am, there's always something to read, always something to dissect,
Yeah.
always something to do. And this year, actually, yeah, like this year, I have been saying I'm getting bored like a lot. And that's something which is super new for me. Like, I would never get when anybody would say, I'm getting bored. I'm like, how can you get bored? There's no time in the world. There's so much to do. I have to do my morning practice. I have to do this and that. And I think even in my business, like the to-do list before human design came into my life, I never even thought about it, that there could be some things which I can take off, because there was
Yeah.
always more to add, always something more to add, but definitely never felt like, oh, I have to take something off my plate as well. And uh, yeah, I really feel it's like, I feel like collectively, I think specifically with the generators, I feel it's a big, big lesson to lean into that doing nothings.
Yeah.
Uh, because I think we have been, it's also very capitalistic training to, because generators do make up most of the workforce. That your worth depends on your productivity, how much you show up, how much you do, how much you do. And so I just know, like, even when I started working for myself, even though I had my own time and I had my own flexibility, I think for the longest time I realized I had this, I think, breakthrough last, I think especially in the pandemic, that I still am actually enslaved to this
Yeah.
whole system. It doesn't matter, even if I have this new structure, I'm still not doing what I want to do. I'm still doing what I feel like I have to do. So, how did human design, like, I've been talking about human design so much, how did human design supported this opening for you, like from rest to integrating that, as you said, that this needs to get out to the creative entrepreneurs, not just to the older people who just need to rest, but also to people who need to create, who need to do, who need to provide. Uh, how did human design then come in to take it to the next level, I believe?
Yeah, yeah, it's so interesting. I actually came like human design, ran into me when I was on a restorative training retreat, kind of in the like mountains in Montana in the US. And it was really interesting because at the time I had implemented the rest and it was making a really big difference also in things like my skin and my digestion and stuff like that, like very physical things. Um, but I was still kind of, I guess, mentally stuck with like, okay, but how am I going to work less when so most of my income came from teaching in-person yoga classes, which, if you can, anyone can make anything work. I really believe that, but you're like, let's say 99% of your income coming from in-person studio classes is it's challenging because you have to kind of go physically from place to place and stuff like that. And so I was very mentally, I think, yeah, like suck. I'm like, but how is that? I just couldn't see outside of that. And then when I came across human design and like really this underlying idea in human design I'm just obsessed with that applies to all of us is like we're not meant to think our way out of the problem. And I think that's so liberating and
Yeah.
so freeing, right? Like, okay, like, and often people will come for a reading and it's like, okay, but and having that same experience of like I'm here and I know it's not even that it's bad here. I just know that here isn't where I'm supposed to be. I'm not feeling my best. I'm not feeling great here. But how do I get to point B and what does point B even look like? And I love that human design is like, who cares? Doesn't matter. Like when we come back to strategy authority, come back to like, whatever it is. For me, I'm sacral to respond. So it's like quite a quick, single definition. It's quite a quick process of like, is this a yes immediately? okay, then it's a no. And that's it's terrifying to kind of let go of mentally trying to figure out the solution and instead come back to in the moment, like really connecting to what is a yes and what is a no. And for me, it still took me and takes me, because it's never ending. It still takes a lot. It took me a long time to trust that, but the rest was so helpful as a foundation, because having spent that time learning how to be in the empty space of rest made it ever so slightly easier to learn how to be in the empty space of saying no to something that my mind says,
Mm.
but you need to say yes to that because you're an idiot if you say no to that. And so, that's the thing about particularly being a generator. But I think, all of us can connect to this in some way, is like when you do start to really move in the like tune of your design, or just live intuitively, whatever you want to call it, you do have to sometimes step almost blindfolded into the dark. All you know is it's not this, but there's this trust that like the next step will reveal itself, or the right thing will come. And that, again, like being just in that rest practice that has someone said this to me the other day from the studio. She was like, I love my vinyasa, I love my kundalini, but what's really beautiful about rest is like there's no goal, really. Like in vinyasa, it's like, oh, I could get toward a handstand, and then I could get toward a one-armed handstand. And even in something like the kundalini practice, it's like, if I do more of this, maybe I'll be more prosperous, I'll bring in more money or more radiance or whatever it is. When it comes to the rest practice, it's like there's no it's like, just do that, there it is. It's just kind of there's no goal. And
Mm.
so I really think spending, even if we're spending 5 minutes, 8 minutes, whatever, every day we're visiting that space of just like in between, quiet, no non-striving, then when we start to really like click into living, and particularly running a business based on your human design, your intuition, whatever you want to call it, it's such a helpful foundation. Because I don't know if you found that too, but for me, like, I mean, I have an open spleen, but again, I think everyone feels this. It's like really moving with my authority and strategy in my business. It works, but it's terrifying. And now I trust it way more. But in the beginning, I was like, I'm going to lose everything, and I still have moments like that
Oh.
regularly. But it just, because I let go of the plan, I let go of and this is not to say like, you let go of the plan to the point where you can't pay your rent. That's not the thing. But I let go of trying to think my way out of the solution, or out of the situation. Yeah.
Yeah, I do have an open spleen, so I 100% get to where you're coming from. And I think as you were speaking, I think one word which was like, yeah, because we just can't believe that it can be that simple, that we
Yes.
can like, can I just like, because that's a natural way of being. Like you're a sacred authority, and for you, it's like this a sacred response, like a yes or no, and that's it. I'm an emotional authority, but for me, I think if I look back at my life, even when I had no clue or idea about human design or emotional authority, uh, I have always wanted to take time. I have always wanted to feel
Yeah.
through things. But of course, my natural flex, because of the conditioning, has always been like to make a decision right now, be decisive.
Yep.
So I think it's just this idea that how could it be this simple? And yes, it's terrifying. And I think actually, thank you for saying that. Kind of like reaffirms me in the heart, like, okay, I'm gonna continue feeling this, and it's like feeling the fear and do it anyway. I think it applies for the spleen. I think a part of
Yes.
me has been has always been waiting for one time when the fear would go away, and then I would do things that I want to do, and then I would probably be open and feel relaxed and feel okay. Like I think if I now like hearing enough, I was like think about it in retrospect, I think there's been a lot of resistance to rest, to pause, because a yes, if I don't do anything, if I don't make it happen, it won't happen. A big one. But two, it's also, I think, this energy of not feeling safe.
Yeah.
That if I don't do this, then it's not safe. And most of the times, I think what I've learned as I have become familiar with my need to feel safe, that it had nothing to do with my money, it had nothing to do with my relationships. Like, feeling safe had nothing to do with my business, none of the external things, as much as I thought. And I think I still think a lot of times this
Yeah.
urge to kind of like control things, it's only so that I can feel safe. But that feeling
Yes.
is, and ironically, actually, that feeling only comes when you let yourself be in that space of nothingness and rest for for a period of time. Because as you said, like, you have a goal in Kundalini, you have a goal when you're doing vinyasa. And I have done so many practices, I think, in the last 5 years of me exploring the spiritual manifestation, all this stuff. It's like there's been a lot of doing. And I think my this last 1.5 years have been all about, I feel, integrating it in my body. And so I just want to,
Mm,
just in case if somebody feels out there you're doing nothing, you are actually doing, you are integrating. Because I have realized that a lot of times things didn't work, no matter how much mindset work I did, no matter how many, even I would say, spiritual practices I did, because none of it had the space to, as you said, how much can you hold? My nervous system was not ready to hold because it was freaking out all the time. And I feel my idea behind doing more yins and doing more restorative yogas, I think in the past 2 years have been only so that I can, as I became aware and started studying and diving deep into the nervous system healing, and that my body needs to be on board too. I can't just work with
yeah.
mind, soul. It's a mind, body, soul. You can't manifest anything into flesh, into reality, unless you actually feel, especially I think as an open space, especially if I feel, like, for me the word is safe. Maybe for anybody it could be something else, but for me it's like, do I feel safe with it? And most of the things that I want to have, that I want to manifest, that I want to achieve, and if I'm not having it, most likely I know by now that I'm repelling it, and I don't feel safe about it.
Yeah.
100%, it's that sense of feeling unsafety. And I feel like rest really really brings that sense of like feeling safe, feeling like you're okay where you are, and you will be okay wherever you will be. I love,
Yes.
I love the practices, specifically as I've been diving into the studio of late, wherever you use a lot of support. And I'm really noticing how there is a resistance to receive support. Uh, and because so much of, I think, even our spiritual practices, our yogic practices are stemmed on how can you, how much strength do you have to hold, to
Yes.
stand on, by on, like, say, one leg.
Yes.
Yeah. Rather than how would it feel to when you're supported? And I think, again, so much of even like the root chakra, energy of feeling supported comes into it, like, so yeah. How do you kind of think that that sense of safety has built in and reflected and started to radiate outside in your business, in your life? Like, how has that shifted things for you as you started to practice this in your life and started to share it? Like, because I think if somebody who's thick in that space, and if somebody would have told me to rest like 6 years ago, like, what the heck? No, I
Yeah.
don't have time for that. I gotta do things. And that's something which, even in like kind of like when I am having the not self experience, the when the frustration kind of like hits me, that's when I'm still there. So
Yeah.
yeah, how did that safety kind of like translate and reflect in your life?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I love that because I think it was very liberating, or just I felt very seen when I found out about the open spleen, because the feeling of being like, am I gonna be okay? You know, that like lack of survival, maybe awareness or instinct. I feel that,
I
you
can
know, like
feel the
that
burn
real.
right now, actually.
Yeah, yeah. It's like it was so it was so kind of sometimes people hear that and they're like, "Oh no." And it's like, "No, it's not a bad thing." It's like that's something that, whenever I've made a big move, um like left I mean, I've left relationship or left like some contract work that I had, or said no to something or like that, the fear of like, well, how, like, the survival fear would kind of bubble up, and to know that like, that's just something that's going to really try to pull your attention. And I mean, again, we all have this, but I think open spleen have this very viscerally, like, just to recognize like, oh, that I don't know, like you said before, I don't know if that's ever going away, and that's okay. I don't have to get to a point where I'm like, I don't feel it. I know that part of my process, and this is what I know now, part of my process is feeling that. Part of my
Mm.
process is that's going to come up, and I'm going to sit with it. And I'm going to, again, what you said before is so important. Like, about like mind, body, soul, right? We can actually be very focused in, yeah, maybe mindset work or talk therapy or spiritual practice, and kind of forget about the physical body. Like, that so much of it sits there. So for me now, I'm like, I know that fear, I think in some way, shape, or form, it's part of everyone's process. But I know for me, that kind of fear of like, am I going to be okay? Am I going to be safe? Is something that can come up. I don't have to feel like that fear is not trying to keep that fear is not trying to tell me this is wrong. That's a really big
Mm.
distinction for me, to know that like that fear will come up and then it will go down if I just let it kind of like raise its head. It's not a fear, which is like, this is like, it's not a fear that is intuitive and trying to protect me. It's just a part of my like almost not self process. And so yeah, like for me, the rest practice has been huge in like getting that to move through my body, like having the and
Mm.
I think something I notice is a lot of us, particularly those of us who might be very energetic and very forward moving, very busy, that's our tendency. We tend to contract around sensation. So if there's a fear or an anxiety, we try to like, we're just like, it's fine, I'll keep going, and everything
That's
gets
been
like,
me, like I think
yeah.
all my life.
Yeah, like I'm really good at doing that too. It's like, okay, like lock it up, lock it down, and just let's keep going forward, whatever, I'm fine. And to actually make space around the fear, or the anxiety or the whatever you're feeling, to be like, when you like soften around it, you feel it even more. It's like intense and it's uncomfortable, but then you're able to kind of like be like, all right, I'm having the fear experience right now. I always have the fear experience when I make a big change in my business, or make a big investment or whatever it is. I always have the fear response. So I'm going to let it, do its thing, and I'm going to make space for it, and do some of these
Mm.
rest practices, because and again, I also like exercising, like sweaty and vigorous. I do that too, but it's like on the days where we call for that, that feels amazing. But sometimes, those of us who are kind of busy people, if we're feeling something, we might then do the intense practice, right? In order to kind of cut that feeling out. But
Mm.
instead, if we can get like soft with it and quiet with it, we really feel it and then can actually get it out of the body, rather than just like building more tension and strength around it. So I think that's been really, really big. And then uh, again, I think the other safety thing is like learning how to feel safe while you're doing nothing at all, because
Yeah.
the constant doing, and this shows up in different ways for everyone, but the constant doing is also kind of a survival instinct and survival mechanism. And I also relate to what you said about for so long never being bored, because I think that's also a survival response, like it's, oh, I've got to learn all this stuff, I've got to read this book, I've got to listen to this podcast, and I love all of that, but you know what I mean, sometimes it's like still this FOMO, nervousness. And then when we learn to be in the empty space or the quiet space or the still space, I think there's less of that always pushing us forward, and we begin to realize that it's safe to be still, like it's safe to be not doing anything for this moment, and that right now is, I think, very valuable.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
especially after the pandemic, I feel we all have kind of like collectively the fear kind of like really came up, I think, during the pandemic. for all of us in personal ways, in the collective way. But
Yes,
even like after it, after like even everything is open and we're getting back to life and stuff, I feel that not in just myself and other people as well, having that fear. So even though you don't have an open spleen, I'm sure a lot of us would be able to connect to that as well.
exactly.
uh, because I feel like for me as well, like I've never felt that sense of not feeling safe so loud as much as I felt in these last 2 years. Uh, so yeah,
Yeah.
as you were talking
Yeah.
about reading as well, like I think one thing that I think you are currently reminding me of is to get back to fiction, reading fiction. And I feel
Yes.
like that, I mean, I have been a total nerd as well. Like growing up, I would always be reading books, even in the games period, I would be
Yes.
reading books. And so, and I kind of like miss like having like reading fiction books behind my textbooks as well.
Yeah.
So
So good.
but of course, like as I grew up, more self-help books, more of these books which can give you information. And of course, then the internet comes, and then you are like on blog. Like I still read a lot of blogs, and that's all beautiful and great and good. But I think there's a sense of like the reason why I don't want to read fiction is because uh, there's a sense like what will it give me?
Yeah.
Yeah. uh but like I think last month I happened to just pick up one random book I got probably a few years ago. I never went through it, and I just read the entire book, staying up till 4 a.m.
So
And
good.
it was so freaking good, and it was like a very casual story. Don't relate at all, but it was just so good. Like it was just so freaking good. That excitement that you have, what's gonna happen, and I think I've missed that, I think, in the past few years, because there was, again, this thing to do, to achieve, to tick off. And it's always nicer to say, I have read this book and this has taught me this, rather than a fiction book. And also, I think I kind of like sometimes I cry when I read books, when I watch movies, because I
Mm.
feel a lot like being an emotional authority. But as you said, like for you have made peace with your open spleen, I think I have made peace with my defined solar plexus, that okay, feeling is a part of the process. I am going to feel through it. It is a part of my it is a part of my process as well. Like if I don't feel it through, I might actually like literally not be able to make a decision that is in alignment with me. So
Yes.
so really making peace with instead of like really these days I'm really practicing to leaning in to that fear, into that feeling, instead of pulling away, which has been my tendency for so long. And I think that's why I even avoided watching movies, I think, for a while, or a lot of these fiction books. So yeah, it's just so beautiful and sweet that it's making its way back to me. And thank you so much for
Yes. I love
opening
that.
that. What are some of your favorite rest rituals? What are the little things that you make, like, apart from the practices, which are so nice and beautiful? But we know, like, a system doesn't just heal with that. Like, you have to integrate it in your life as well. So we just talked about reading fictions, but yeah, what else? Like, how do you really integrate and teach your community around integrating rest in their lives?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, even the first thing is that, my work days are full, but they're full also with things like walking outside where there's lots of trees and doing the rest practices. And like I don't see it's not like I see that as part of my day. I see the time to stop and to like move my body in something more dynamic or do one of the more still things or go outside and walk like the whole I really feel that it's like that's just in the thread of the whole day. It's not separate, it's everything is kind of connected. So for me, that makes all the difference.
Yeah.
Because sometimes there is a lot of work on the computer and it is about like it's not like the computer work is everything. And if I'm lucky, I'll get to go for a walk or, do a rest practice. It's like if because I'm at the computer all day, those have to happen. Otherwise, I'm not going to do very good work. So, so definitely just like bringing it into every day. And sometimes you want to resist it with all your things. So I just look at my phone. I'm like, all right, 1 o'clock, that's it. I'm off. I'm gone. And I have to do something and then I can come back and get back into it. So that's the biggest thing for me. Also, just making it not a big deal. Sometimes it's nice to like set up a beautiful space and light the candles and the incense. And I love that. But also, sometimes it's like wearing jeans and whatever, or pajamas, and just doing the short practice, not even on a yoga mat or a sheepskin, just in your kitchen. And then it's like you don't have to be like, oh, I've got to roll out the yoga mat and whatever. It's like, just do. That's why I have some practices which are seated on the chair, so you can just do it at your desk. So to me, that's the biggest thing, like bringing weaving things in. And then the other thing that you know I really try to work with is like trying to make my space feel as kind of like restful as possible, while I'm not a clean freak by any sense of the word, but trying to just keep like if I have 5 minutes, don't pick up the phone, but like training myself to like make the room more beautiful, just feel better, wipe something down, put something away, things like that also just take pressure off the nervous system, right? The other thing is, all the things, like reading fiction. I love to watch YouTube vlogs, but to make like a ritual out of it, and sit down, have a cup of tea, and then pick up my phone and look at the stories of the favorite people I love. Yeah, so all those things kind of coming together. I think that in a way to have a day or a life that feels like it's gentle and there's space, it actually interestingly takes effort to set up these small habits so that it just becomes a part of how you live and who you are. And the other thing is that being self-employed, that there are some days where I'm like, I just got like, I got nothing, I got no inspiration. I'm gonna take a nap, and I do that, and sometimes again my mind tries to tell me, because we have the whole world always screaming at us that to do live this way is wrong. So I don't think it's about, again, it's like the fear thing. It's not about waiting to the point where you just find it easy and it comes naturally to you and you're like, I don't care what anyone says, I'm gonna nap at like 12 p.m. I don't know if that point ever really happens. So just do it, just like
Mhm.
stop what you're doing and do 10 minutes of like a rest practice, or go and lie down on your bed and set a time of 15 minutes and just lie there. And, or like go out as soon as you wake up in the morning, go out and go and be in nature and be outside. Just those little things. It's so easy to not create those habits, but once they start to be there as kind of foundation, it just feels like there's so much more space. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think you said in one of your practices, or I don't know if I've heard it from somewhere else, but something like it's better to have like a 15-minute of rest practice than no rest at all. Than having, like, you don't have to dive
Exactly.
in like a 60 minutes. And I think we have made kind of a big deal about the morning routines. I feel about having this big ass morning routine where you're doing this and this and this and this. And I think a lot of times I'm like, what should I do? Like, I have so many options and I have to give so much time.
Yes.
Like, most of the time, I'm just like, what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? Whereas maybe you can just, like, these days, I'm really practicing not using guided meditations, not using anything external, but to kind of like sit in the stillness, listen
Yes.
to probably a chant, or just breathe through
Yes.
it. And it's even though I've been practicing meditation for so long, of course it's not the easiest thing to do. Like, silent meditation are still the most difficult things to do, because your mind will try to pull you out of it. It just doesn't feel safe. uh,
Yeah.
as I said, for someone it could be another word instead of safe. But yeah, I think we all have our own charge what before we wind up, like I just wanna like also have you a little bit your perspective on like handling. You talked a lot about not being on our phones, not checking, not going on Instagram. Like how having an online business, how are you like really having these strong boundaries? How are you practicing that with Instagram? Because you do seem to be like, whatever I've been seeing, like you do talk a little bit about checking your emails like once a while, or check or logging out of emails. And I really was talking to my sister the other day, and I was like, gosh, I never thought about it, how much time I actually do spend in just checking my emails. And a lot of times there can be, say, a no, there can be a change in something, and you're literally going out in the day, and suddenly you have one email pop in, which even though it's not your work day, and you see it, it's like, oh, and it just kind of
Yes.
like ruins my moment. So, and
Yes.
so with Instagram, I feel. So yeah, how are you really managing and handling and navigating, I think is the right word, swimming through this shift?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, and I've been talking about it a bit because it is something that I'm really trying to focus on at the moment, because it is when your business is wrapped up in uh like, emails and it's online, it's so easy for mentally to have every excuse under sun. I'm working, but I have to because I'm
Yeah.
working. And for me, I got really good at this over the summer, and then I launched the studio in September, not September, February. I launched a studio in February, and then launching the studio was, it's been amazing, but it's been just big, like, so a whole, like, having an online membership platform and lots of people from all over the world. And so I think, it's so easy. I kind of fell back into being more on the phone, on the email, after I'd really set up such a good, I'd had, like, finally gotten to a good rhythm with it over the summer of like not being there. And then I found myself too much back into it again. And exactly what you're saying, if you check the email, sometimes you see something and it's like, oh, you get this like feeling of like, maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's just like, oh, you just, it kind of ruins where you are in that moment. And so something I read Atomic Habits when I was in Bali, because I was just curious, and I think on one level, I'm very good at creating like the meditation habit and the rest habit and all those kinds of things. But what really stood out to me was, yeah, like there's still too much attention on the emails and the phone, and so that just became like my focus about like, I'm going to get back to that place that I've been before. And I think we're always going to be on there too much. I don't know if, like, I know that there's some people that say don't have a smartphone, just go back to the, what, 3315 or whatever it was called. I don't think I'll ever be there. But I think the biggest things for me are the morning and evening, so having the phone in a different room and not like opening emails or Instagram until, like, let's say 9 a.m. or something like that. And then I've been about between 8 and 9 at night, just, not having the phone anywhere near me or whatever. And that, it does work. And I think what we have to do, because we have to realize that they're meant to be addictive, and then when you have your business tied up in it, it's just, you know, even more. And so I think we have to have like a lot of grace and a lot of patience
Yeah.
and start with very small boundaries. So I even started with like, okay, it goes on airplane mode for an hour, and that would be how I started, and things like that. And then, I wrote this in the email newsletter. When I started to do the email thing, as soon as I'd close the email, I'd be like, oh, I've got to send that one, I've got to send that one. And so I just started writing it down on a piece of paper, and it was really annoying because it would be just quick to go on and send it, but I was like, I've just got to break that kind of addiction, because I don't know if, I think so many of us can find ourselves with a spare moment, and instead of, just standing there and whatever, taking a breath, or even this idea I spoke about before of just like, okay, let me just make my space feel better. You just go open the phone, email, Instagram, whatever, you check the thing.
Yeah, yeah.
It just
And then
becomes this automatic
yeah,
thing.
like literally your phone is kept here and your office is literally just one hand away. And I'm really
Mhm.
and I've really noticed it in the past year. And then specifically, I think as Instagram, you kind of feel this pressure to also creating content. So it's like every time I have a thought, I have an idea, there's an urge to like, okay, let me create a quick post on that. Let me do this. And now I'm starting to write my
Yes,
ideas and like take my time, even though with emotional authority, I should take my little bit sweet time. But it's always just so tempting. Oh, I would rather, just put it up on Canva. It's so much easier rather than to put it on my notes section and then go back and then do that. Uh, but yes, it's literally like I have really been consciously trying to step back from that, creating content on this speed, on this momentum, because of course of Instagram promotes that. And it's been a kind of like a rebellious act, I think, in the past 2 years to not do it when the world is even doing it even harder. and to
totally.
now and to now, like, I was doing so much reels 2 years back, but now, or when they came, but now I'm like, I don't want to do it, like maybe once in a while, because I've now everything is a reel, every video is a reel. But
Yeah,
really, like, I realized like my bandwidth is really like 3 posts in 15 days. I've realized I can't
yeah,
do more than that. uh so yeah, it's just, as you said, it is kind of like, do you think safety also comes into play, because we just don't feel safe?
yeah, yeah, totally. That can definitely come into play, and it's just become, it's just what everyone does. It's just so
Mm,
normal that we have to be abnormal about it, I think.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think,
yeah.
yeah, I love that phrase. It's so normal that we have to be abnormal about it. Yeah, like, I think when I say like, no, I'm not gonna, like, create content on a spree right now, it's like saying a no, which is very abnormal. So, I would love to have you share a little bit about your offerings, or how can people reach out to you if they want to dive deeper into working with you, or into your space, into your energy. Uh, Fill in some.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my Instagram handle is at the Daily Rest. So that's where I post some poetry and little updates on the studio and things like that. And then my website is emmyrae.com. So it's EMMIERAE.com. And yeah, there's lots of offerings, mainly the studio and soft business group kind of mentoring and courses that bring in this idea of like, how can we be business owners, and also like really have a good time and feel good and feel like, yeah, safe. um so yeah, yeah, bringing human design to that as well, of course.
Mm. And I would really, really recommend you guys to sign up for Emmy's newsletters. I think, I don't remember how I find Emmy, but definitely, I think I'd signed up to your blog. And then one day I just saw your email and I was like, oh my God, she writes these big newsletters. And I started to read your newsletters on my mat because it was so difficult to start any of my morning practice first thing. So I started reading, and it was so beautiful and, again, very expansive for someone who loves writing, who loves sharing. And I always
Yeah.
say like, oh, newsletters, you shouldn't write so much, nobody, because everybody says nobody has the time. But I was like, I'm reading this, like, I
Yeah.
am really making time for this. So yes, thank you so much. I would really recommend, if you guys love reading, or if you guys just love that slow reading experience, uh, I think newsletters are sweet and beautiful, and I love
Okay.
yours. So sign up if you guys are in for that treat. uh,
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Emmy. It was so, so beautiful to have you share your beautiful wisdom and your experience and your journey. Thank you so much for being here. It was just absolutely stunning to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Such a pleasure.